Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ISJL Virtual Vacation. I'm Nora Katz. Today, we're talking about Southern Jewish film festivals, arts, culture, and Jewish visibility. Jews have participated in the American film industry since its very beginnings. Today, Jews not only remain involved in all aspects of film production and consumption, but there are also numerous festivals specifically dedicated to showcasing Jewish films for diverse audiences. What is the cultural role of the Jewish Film Festival, and how does it fit into the long history of Jewish contributions to the American film industry? Which Jewish film festivals exist in the American South, and what purpose do they serve for Southern Jewish communities? How have these festivals responded to the pandemic in order to continue serving their communities? In this episode, we take a look at the history of Jewish involvement in producing and consuming American films in order to understand the cultural position of the Jewish Film Festival. Doing so renders visible the ways in which Jews have both contributed to the development of mainstream American cinema and asserted and sustained their own culturally specific film culture throughout history. In addition, we consider the role of the global pandemic in producing new conditions for making and viewing Jewish films, and consider what these practices might look like in the future. Elias Levy Swain, a senior at Carleton College who worked at the ISJL as a history and heritage extern this winter, wrote and researched this episode. I want to acknowledge his hard work and his contributions to the ISJL Virtual Vacation. When I chatted with Elias about his work on the episode, he told me why this topic interested him.
It was kind of grounded in just kind of my own personal interests. I grew up Jewish, I grew up obsessed with film, and I kind of had some vague sense that those things went together in some way. And I think that a lot of that is kind of grounded in very toxic stereotypes, but is also grounded in some truth, which I kind of found out while doing this project, which was really interesting. I haven't had the opportunity to go to a Jewish film festival before, and it's not something that I really understood existed on the scale that it does. And so, yeah, it was kind of just like Judaism, film, that was an open question of like how they fit together. And yeah, I think that's kind of how I started looking into that.
Jewish connections to the film industry run deep. Jews have demonstrated great success in the film industry for a variety of reasons, some commonly agreed upon, others more controversial. In their introduction to the book, Hollywood's Chosen People, The Jewish Experience in American Cinema, Hava Tirosh Samuelson, Daniel Bernardi, and Murray Pomerantz argue that for some Jews, the American dream was inextricably linked to the promise of success in Hollywood. Yiddish press and theater in the United States were vibrant in the early 20th century, but they declined as more and more Jews participated in English language culture and performance. In the years between World War I and World War II, Jews sought to bring their Jewish and American selves together, becoming consumers and producers of American entertainment. By the 1920s, Los Angeles was the fourth largest city in America, with a significant Jewish population. The authors of Hollywood's Chosen People go on to write that the movie business and the Jewish experience came to share the Hollywood sun. But Hollywood also has a history of Jewish ambiguity and suppression of Jewish identity that is tied to both acculturation and anti-Semitism. This anti-Semitism manifested itself in persistent and, of course, patently untrue beliefs that Jews control the film industry and the media, in spite of the anti-Semitism and cultural alienation that have kept Jews from holding power in Hollywood throughout history, and also the fact that Jews are not a unified group of people. At the same time, there was a lack of explicit anti-Semitic politics in the US in the early 20th century, which created good conditions for a combination of assimilation and mediated cultural expression, and also made Jews more patriotic, particularly those who found commercial success and upward mobility. Thus, their films were more popular because they resonated with mainstream audiences who enjoyed patriotic content during and surrounding the war years. Between 1944 and 1952, over 137,000 European Jews immigrated to the U.S., bringing the post-war Jewish population in the U.S. to 5 million. The Holocaust not only brought Jews to America, but also introduced a new topic for representation in film, something that has been controversial ever since. Moreover, hundreds of Jewish artists arrived in the United States fleeing Nazi Europe, and many of them made their way to Hollywood. Just as the end of World War II brought new kinds of material for Jewish films, it also meant a wider audience for Jewish culture due to widespread condemnation of Nazism and anti-Semitism. This is the first time we really start seeing explicitly Jewish stories being told in mainstream films. Many scholars argue that throughout the history of Hollywood, Jewishness has been represented by Jews as conflicted or ambiguous, not necessarily widely embraced by Jews themselves, but not rejected outright either. At the same time, many films celebrate Jewish culture and tackle explicitly Jewish themes for Jewish and non-Jewish audiences. The National Center for Jewish Film was founded in 1976. Their mission is the collection, preservation, and exhibition of films with artistic and educational value relevant to the Jewish experience and the dissemination of these materials to the widest possible audience. And Jewish film festivals were established beginning in the 1980s and 1990s. The first was the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival, founded in 1980. That festival and the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, which we'll talk about in more detail later, are the largest Jewish film festivals in the world. Jewish film festivals and organizations like the National Center for Jewish Film contest the narrative of assimilation, demonstrating that Jews have not only contributed to American cinema, but have carved out their own spaces in order to preserve their minority cultural heritage. In other words, success in the film industry can be measured not only in the breadth of audience that Jewish film professionals have engaged, but also in their ability to maintain Jewish American film culture in the face of forces incentivizing assimilation. These themes of assimilation and Jewish distinctiveness are key parts of the story of American and specifically Southern Jewish film festivals. We've established that Jews are deeply entrenched in the film industry, and film festivals take place within this world. How? And what role do they serve? Jewish film festivals are a relatively new phenomenon, really taking root over the past 40 years. There is little scholarship about these festivals, but they're notable for the way that they make connections between local and regional Jewish communities and filmmakers from all over the world. Many of these film festivals, especially in the South, are entirely volunteer-run, sometimes connected to federations, Jewish community centers, and congregations. I will add that the Institute of Southern Jewish Life is very proud to have been a part of the early history of many Southern Jewish film festivals through our pioneering program, Jewish Cinema South. One of the many film festivals that began as a part of that programming series is the Mobile Jewish Film Festival in Mobile, Alabama. To learn more about the festival and to get a sense of what the ecosystem of Southern Jewish film festivals looks like on the ground, I spoke to Barry Silverman and Ricky Voigt, co-chairs of the Mobile Jewish Film Festival.
My name is Ricky Voigt, and I co-chair with Barry Silverman the Mobile Jewish Film Festival.
Hey, I'm Barry Silverman in Mobile, Alabama. And very happy to be here talking about the Mobile Jewish Film Festival, which is getting ready for its 21st festival, believe it or not, all thanks to the Institute of Southern Jewish Life. I remember years ago, this has had to be in the year 2000 or maybe 1999, I'm not sure, but I saw a notice that the Institute was going to be starting a Southern Jewish Film Festival, and they were asking towns who were interested to get in touch with them. And we got in touch because the idea really intrigued me. So Ricky Voigt and I, who has been my longtime co-chair of the festival since we began, and we're still doing it, we got together with the folks in Jackson.
So he called me up and he said, I understand the Institute of Southern Jewish Life is doing this project and trying to encourage communities, and I'm really interested in the film festival. I'm going to go explore and see what it is. So then he came back and he was on fire. And so the two of us sat down and just started brainstorming, and then we got people to join us and to work on the ground, and it just unfolded just beautifully with the Institute's support, of course. They did wonderful support for the communities like ours.
The Mobile Jewish Film Festival has been going on since the year 2000. This year has been a very strange year, but in preceding years, our festival was in January. It consists of 10 films and a student film festival. The 10 films are held at various venues around Mobile and Baldwin County. We have 2 each at the Reform Synagogue, Havas Hesed, and 2 at Sharai Shemayim, or the Spring Hill Avenue Temple, as it's called. We have a film at the Mobile Art Museum. We have 3 films at the University of South Alabama, whom we partner with. We have 1 film at the Mobile Public Library, the downtown library, and we have 1 film in Fairhope, Alabama, which is across the bay. And so it's grown from 3 to 10 films, and who knows, maybe it'll keep growing. This is separate from our regular series, and this is, we show a film about the Holocaust every year to middle school students and high school students in both Mobile and Baldwin counties. Before the pandemic, we actually showed films to about 3,000 children. This is in 1 year. So my co-chair, Ricky Voigt, is really almost totally responsible for that student film series. And it's through her dedication that this has gone on and grown every year. And we have a lot of educators actually in the county, Mobile County, Baldwin County, who teach Holocaust in their classrooms. And so they are our link to the school systems, and we go and show a film. And also we have a guide every year, a speaker who may come from out of town, or we may use somebody here in town to help the students understand the film and be there to, the guide is there to be asked, to answer questions after the film is over.
When we started the film festival, I think we had three films. And one of the films we brought a couple years later was Paper Clips. And our speaker, because with every film we bring a speaker if we can, and we do entertainment or sing-alongs, depending if it's a musical, or we have dinners, or it's wonderful. So we brought this speaker. She was the teacher in the film, and we invited a bunch of schools to come to the main event, and classes and teachers. And then we did, for the first time, we had her sit with the middle school teachers for lunch. We provided lunch and just talk to them. And so then from that came the workshops we started doing with our Holocaust films that we would take into the classroom with our speakers. And then the Gulf Coast Holocaust Center collaborated with us, and we would offer a workshop for teachers and then present them with a copy of that film to have in their library. So it's just sort of developed, and it's wonderful. I'm a retired teacher, so to me it's education. We like to give not only Holocaust education, which is I do that too, but the education of who we are as Jews, culturally, religiously, so it would help people understand and accept people that are different than they are. And it's done that. I think it's really been successful in that way. So we're very pleased with that aspect of it.
Our film festival really has had great response from the non-Jewish community. We get a lot of other people coming, other than Jewish people coming to the films. We have great response from the Christian community. And we have some great discussions. Sometimes some of the discussions have become very passionate.
I think that the role that it plays, again, goes back to education and of course entertainment. But one of the most fun things that Barry and I enjoy after the film is congregating with everyone and talking and sharing. And it's a broad community event. That's why we do something afterwards as often as possible, whether it be a meal or music or some kind of entertainment. because we want people to stay around and talk to one another, and it builds community.
Yeah, I think the role of the film festival in the Jewish community, I think, is that our main strength is the way it links us to the rest of the community. Yes, we enjoy it ourselves. I enjoy myself as a member of the Jewish community, but I love coming into the venue wherever we are, and you see people from all walks of life, and you see people from all ages and cultures and religions. Uh, we have a very strong Mobile Jewish Christian dialogue that's been going for a number of years. And a lot of the people who are involved in the dialogue come to watch the films also. So I just think it's something that links us together, whether it's other people in the Jewish community or from outside the community. The Jewish community in Mobile we're a very small part of the general community. And yet when the outside community comes to one of our festivals, they can understand us a little more, and they will see that, we're just people. We've got the same, the same problems. Maybe they'll learn a little something of history they didn't know before.
Well, I think Barry's and my goal has been that we want them to see Jews as people first, and that they can understand who we are as a people, but they also see us as people, so that there's an openness there and they feel comfortable, which is why it's important that we show one of our films at the temple and one of our films at the synagogue every year. Not just the student films, but the other films as well.
We form bridges with the films. We form bridges within our own community and with the outside Christian community also. Yeah, in a small community like Mobile, we look for young people to take this over. Ricky Voigt and I and have been doing this now as co-chairs for 20 years, more than 20 years. And we'd like young people to come and take it over.
For me, one of the hopes that I have is to get younger people on board. And I realize that where Barry and I are so passionate about it, and we're willing to do everything and all we can, the young people will not do that. So we're going to give them bite-sized jobs. And so we're in the outreach right now, trying to find young people who will commit.
Frankly, in a city this size, sometimes it's hard to find the younger people who are going to be taking this over. We have a great committee, the Film Festival Committee, but most of us are older. So if there's anybody who would like to move to Mobile, if you like films, come on and live in Mobile. You're gonna love it. We're close to the beaches. It's a relaxed way of life, and we'll put you on the committee. We might even make you co-chair in a year or two.
These festivals are indicative of the rich history of Jews in the South, of course. But to me, they're a reminder of the vibrant and active Jewish communities in this region in the present. One such community is in Nashville, Tennessee, where the Nashville Jewish Film Festival is celebrating its 21st anniversary. I spoke to 3 of the co-directors of the festival, most of whom have been involved since its inception, about how the festival developed and about why Jewish film festivals matter, especially in the South.
Hi, I'm Loretta Saff, and I am one of the co-directors of the Nashville Jewish Film Festival.
I'm Jackie Carr, a native Nashvilleian, and I am a co-director of the Nashville Jewish Film Festival.
I'm Lori Eskin, and I am the co-founder and co-chair of the Nashville Jewish Film Festival, which we are entering our 21st year, and we'll celebrate that in October. We started at the temple, the Ohavai Shalom congregation in Nashville. We're now under the auspices of the JCC.
Even though when we were at the temple, it was never a fundraiser for the temple. We had our own account. We raised money to support what we were doing. And that was to bring an experience with Jewish life to people of the Nashville community.
And we are very proud and very excited and very creative in our attempt to deal with COVID and anything else that comes our way, because we believe so much in our festival. And we have been very lucky with support of the community.
It was started in 2001 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the temple. And it was just for a few days over a weekend, and we just grew from there. We always had an opening night celebration and a closing night celebration, and we've had special things that we've kept through the years. We even started my co-chair, Kathy Gutto, had passed away after 4 years. And in her honor, we started a student film competition.
One of the things we wanted to do when Kathy passed is how can we commemorate Kathy? And early on, we realized that students are making Jewish films. So we started a Jewish student film festival. And it was called, you got the Kathy Gutto Award, which involved $1,000 that we have been the recipients from CAA. And Rod Essick is a major agent player there, and he has always been very gracious in giving that $1,000 prize to our winner. It is an international competition. We do get a lot of Israeli films. The requirements is it has to have been made within 2 years of our festival. And it has to be made as a student. Now that student could be any age. It could be a middle schooler, it could be a high schooler, it could be college, it could be post-grad, whatever, it doesn't matter. The filmmaker does not have to be Jewish, just the content does.
That was pretty successful. We didn't do it last year. It just wasn't going to work out. I think we're going to try to get it done again this year. We've had submissions from all over, mainly Israel and the United States.
Well, our mission is to embrace the life of Jewish people, whether it's through how they live, how they eat, what they believe. And there are different kinds of Jews. I mean, there are religious Jews. Just in our community alone, we have, I grew up here in Nashville, and we had one Reformed temple, one conservative temple, and one Orthodox temple. And that was it. And then now we have a second Reformed congregation, and we have a Chabad. And, I didn't even know what those things are, but everyone is Jewish, but they look at it differently.
It's entertaining, it's educational, but it's also a showcase for what it means to be Jewish in today's modern world. And what we hope is that people realize that you don't have to be Jewish to come to a Jewish film festival, and that it is a learning experience, and it can be certainly fun and fascinating and important to getting the information out there and making you, the audience, more well-rounded so you understand. Now, most of our audience is Jewish because that's just how these things normally go.
Well, it's taken a while to build up the audience. And sadly, when it was under the auspices of the temple, people from other congregations felt like, I don't want to give them money because I want it to go to my congregation. So being at the JCC is much more neutral. But I do think that it's become just a staple in the Nashville community, and mainly the Jewish community, but I think others know about it. And we're always reaching out to the non-Jewish community, and we have participation, but not huge. We'd like more.
We are no different than anyone else, and we're just trying to show that through different forms of film, and also the anti-Semitism that exists still today in the US, in France, all over the world.
But bringing Jewish films that offer education and entertainment, inspiration, and knowledge of what it is to be Jewish is really what our goal is all about. And we don't like our movies to be too heavily Jewish. We like them to have a message of some sort, and entertainment is very important to us too. So it is, it has become something in Nashville where we find people asking us, when is it this year? Oh, isn't it almost time for ... And that's very exciting to us because, you know, early on, it was like, oh, by the way, yes, there is a film festival. Yes. Oh, you remember that's what we started. That's how we wanted to get people to understand what it means to be Jewish. And now we even get, you know, a lot of film companies sending us their films in the hopes that they can be included. So it's a very satisfying experience.
Last year, like everybody else, we went virtual, and this year we were debating how to proceed and decided to do mostly virtual, but some in person as well. I think people have really enjoyed the virtual, but miss being with people and the camaraderie and the social aspect of it.
We, last year, one of the best parts of being virtual is we could bring in people, actually, that one of our guest speakers who is a songwriter here in Nashville, he happened to be in Europe at the time, I can't remember where, but he was able to come into us live through this, what we're doing here, the Zoom. We had Nancy Spielberg, who was out in California. I mean, we had all these people, and nobody could say, well, you know, my travel schedule doesn't let me get there. This Zoom thing was great because we could all be together.
Well, as I say, they matter because it's an easy way for people to acknowledge that they're Jewish. It's not that they walk in and say, hello, I'm Jewish, I'm coming to this film, but I think that it is something that touches their, if they have a guilt reflex, they should be doing something Jewish, then there's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go to the Jewish Film Festival and I'll call my mother and tell her that I went, and she'll be very proud. So but besides that, you know, there are a lot of activities of other sorts here in town and groups that have their events that are around either interest or backgrounds or something. And so we feel that we are being counted among all of them. Don't leave the Jewish people out. And not only that, we're a lot of fun.
So when I was in New York, and people said, where are you from? Nashville. And they said, oh, you know, and I would mention I was Jewish because, you know, a lot of people in New York, if they're not Jewish, they still seem Jewish. And they're like, really, you know, you're Jewish and you're from Nashville? And I was like, yeah, we actually have 3 synagogues and we wear shoes. It's amazing because people have this vision, or they used to before we became the It City. Anyway, I think it's important to have the festival for all Jews and non-Jews to see what they kind of know, but may not know a lot of. We need to step up at some point and say, you know, we are all humans. We all bleed the same red blood. So if, you know, a comedy about Jews makes you realize that Jews have things that go on in their life that you relate to on your own, or a documentary gives you some insight to how we got here. Look, I am a 6th generation Jew in America. So I didn't have family members in the Holocaust. My mother's family were German Jews in New York City, living a very good life when all that was going on. I really didn't understand any of this until I became an adult, and even more so as I've, you know, been involved with the festival and things. But, you know, I think everybody just kind of kept their head down low. You know, people changed their names and what have you. And I knew people that were survivors, but I never really heard their story. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Some did, but now I've gotten to hear so many more stories, and it's just very eye-opening. I'm not sure that I was blessed or left without something, not having all that information growing up, because it is horrific, and particularly non-Jews they may know about it, but they really don't get the gravity of it.
Well, as a New Yorker, we have a lot of Jewish things to attend and be part of. And in the South, there aren't so many things. And I think people have really flocked to this kind of non-congregational kind of way to socialize with other Jews and to be with other Jews and to learn about Jewish things. I think it's really become an important part of our community.
Of course, Jewish film festivals also represent an important opportunity for filmmakers to showcase their work and build their audiences. To learn more, I spoke to Aviva Kempner, an award-winning documentary filmmaker whose mission is to tell stories about underknown American Jews. She's perhaps best known for her Emmy-nominated and Peabody Awarded film The Life and Times of Hank Greenberg. And her most recent film is Rosenwald, which tells the story of businessman and philanthropist Julius Rosenwald, who partnered with Booker T. Washington and African American communities to build over 5,000 schools in the Jim Crow South.
Hi, from Washington, D.C. I'm Aviva Kempner. I'm a documentary filmmaker who for over 40 years have been making films about underknown Jewish heroes. It's sort of my MO, although I'm going off on another little tangent recently. I just had this revelation in '79 that I had to go make films, first of all, about Jews fighting Nazis. And since then, it's been a film about Jewish resistance against the Nazis, the baseball slugger Hank Greenberg, who faced a lot of anti-Semitism and welcomed Jackie Robinson, Gertrude Berg, who had this wonderful show on the TV, The Goldbergs, which I would claim is the most Jewish show you've ever seen on TV. She also was on radio, but also a very positive Jewish mother figure, and unfortunately had to face the McCarthy era in terms of supporting her stage husband, who was unfairly blacklisted and targeted. And then the story of Julius Rosenwald, the head of Sears and Roebuck, who partnered with African-American communities, and they built over 5,000 schools in the rural South for African-Americans, as well as establishing this Rosenwald Fund that helped the young, gifted, and Black artisans and intellectuals. And most recently, I finished a film on Mo Berg, back to a little baseball, but also, again, always fighting the Nazis. And he was a spy about the nuclear capability of the Nazis. And now I'm working on a film on Ben Hecht, who was a writer in Chicago, very prominent writer, newspaper writer, then became a playwright, very successful in Hollywood, from working with Hitchcock and Notorious to William Wyler and Wuthering Heights. And he also did, the comic romance. And then, but most importantly, he, with others from Palestine, tried to get FDR and the US government to allow more Jews during World War II into this country. He's a real activist. He staged pageants and wrote copy in newspapers calling for the saving of European Jewry after it was known that he had written about 2 million had died. And then later on trying to get more Jews to Palestine. So my MO is making films about underknown Jewish heroes. Well, it's interesting. There's one thing to make films about underknown Jewish heroes. The second thing is to get them out. Now, my purpose, because I love seeing movies in the movie theaters, that all 5 of my films have had commercial releases and I've been in the movie theaters. But always before you take films out that way, you try to do festivals. And as much as possible, I have showcased and premiered my films at Jewish film festivals. And after my first film, Partisans of Vilna, was at the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival, which is sort of the grandmother of all Jewish film festivals, both in how early it was established and how big it was. I came back to Washington and I thought, actually a rabbi, Tickton, who was a good friend and a mentor to me, challenged me because I said, we really need a Jewish film festival here. And he said, well, why don't you start it? Well, I was already active with the Jewish Community Center of Washington. We had come back to our old building that had been abandoned after the riots in the late 60s. And I took it to the staff there and I said, let's start a Jewish film festival. So in 1990, we started one, and the rest is history. There were just few in the country, and now there's dozens. As a matter of fact, during this pandemic period, I have been on more Zooms, and it's just wonderful that all these Jewish film festivals, all my films have been on them. All my films have been at Jewish film festivals. My joke is, make a Jewish film and see the world, because it's not only in DC, but there's Jewish film festivals. I mean, Hank Greenberg won Best Film at the Hong Kong Jewish Film Festival. And of course, there's a lot in Europe, and then there's Jerusalem. So it's, I think, a fascinating phenomena. It's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And, it's a way that Jews and non-Jews can come see and learn historically or contemporarily, what's happening in terms of the Jewish experience. As much as possible, the festivals are very good about bringing the directors or the creative people behind them. And of course, now during the pandemic, at least by Zoom. And it's really a great learning experience, but I think also opens up our horizons in the community. All my films, especially the last 4, have been the American experience. So, obviously I'm going to get baseball people to want to come and see the film about Hank Greenberg and Mo Berg. I'm very proud that it's been very mixed audiences to come see Rosenwald. A lot of members of the African-American community have come, and Molly You Who Mrs. Goldberg, a lot of, especially women in the business or just women in general, coming to see a film about women's heroes. But, since on a very strong level, I make these films of underknown Jewish heroes for my community. As a child of a Holocaust survivor, I decided very early, when I decided to go make movies on fellow Jews, that I wanted very much to bring a positive presentation. And I think first and foremost, I'm doing it for the Jewish community. So in the atmosphere of a Jewish film festival, most times I'm brought there. I can have dialogue with people, there's receptions, and I would hope not only the subject matter inspires people, especially I think Rosenwald has inspired a lot of Jewish philanthropy, because he's an incredible example. But I'm hoping I've inspired maybe young people to go in the business, as we say. You go to these communities because you want to inspire your own community to continue on in the spirit of your heroes. I mean, for me, certainly. On the other hand, a lot of non-Jews come to films, and I think it's important in terms of my films for them to see, especially with all the negative stereotypes that come out of anti-Semitism, to see positive stories of Jews. So I'm hoping I'm contributing to an alternative. Again, I've chosen to make films about underknown Jewish heroes. So I think my role is that I've brought both these positive examples of Jewish heroes in history, and for 4 of them, they're American Jewish history, both to my own people. So, and these are stories, when I say underknown, they're really underknown. These are stories that help give positive examples of what our people faced, how we rose to the occasion, how these individuals rose to the occasion, especially to fight the isms, fascism, anti-Semitism, sexism, McCarthyism, and Nazism. And I think it helps to bring some pride in the Jewish community, but more importantly, to be vigilant about the kind of issues we face. And I think people coming out of the film, I was just on a webinar yesterday about anti-Semitism, and Henry Ford, who was in Detroit where Hank Greenberg played. And I don't think people realized how difficult it was for American Jews who felt pressure to change their names to make it in society. The kind of catcalling that Hank faced as a baseball player, you would never do that today. So I think to understand where we're going to, I think we have to understand where we've been from. And it both helps the Jewish community to learn about our own, but I think the wider community to learn, like for instance, in baseball, no one faced the racism that Jackie Robinson did when he first entered. But as the film on Hank Greenberg shows, there was no white baseball player that faced the catcalling when he went up to bat against the opposing team or in stadiums like Hank Greenberg did. And maybe we'll get a little bit more empathy. But most of all, I think it's historical understanding of the roots of anti-Semitism. I always tease we should have bought stock in Zoom, but I think these virtual screenings are incredible, just in terms of people feeling a sense of community. I know programmers at different Jewish centers and synagogues that they have this product that they can show and have discussions. I think it's a way to keep people together as a community. And what I think is going to be interesting is when we go back to in-person, how much there's still going to be these virtual screenings. One of the Hank Greenberg screenings, a man came out and said, "This is the second time I've seen the film and I'm still crying." So, I mean, what can you say to make? I wanted to put on my grave, "She made men cry." So obviously it brought back something in his background. When I came out of Rosenwald, I remember one of the earlier screenings, a young Jewish kid came up and he says, "Now I know what I want to do with my life. I want to get involved in philanthropy." You can't replace that. And with Molly, the film on Gertrude Berg and Molly Goldberg, I had so many women come out and say, "I had no idea she was such a pioneer in early TV and radio. And, why don't we know this, women's history?" So that made me feel really good that, they learned something they hadn't know. And with Mo Berg, people come out and say, "God, how brave he was." And I think for a filmmaker to be there in person, if you've made a good film and people like it, there's nothing like Jewish quelling to make you think. Hank Greenberg took 13 years to make. I call it my bat mitzvah film. So, it's all those years of fundraising and trying to struggle to put a film together. And then when the audience gets it, there's nothing like that. I make documentaries, but I make documentaries, I hope, that feel like feature films. First of all, I use a lot of footage. I really get great editors and they really, I think, flow. And I want people, so I'm going to use the word educational, but I think my films also entertain just the way they're made. And again, there's nothing like having 3 generations of families coming to see your movies, which often, not until recently, could they even be reunited, especially Hank Greenberg, 3 generations of baseball fans. And I think that experience of seeing the film in person, hearing me talk, but more important, the families coming together. I mean, I really want young people to come to my films and coming out and, having that exchange, like, especially when Hank first came out, like, "Grandpa, is that really how it was in terms of how Jews were being treated?" We don't know about Father Coughlin. We don't know about that you had to change your last name. And was he really that much of a hero? So I think, again, an in-person screening with the film itself, and even as a bigger plus with a filmmaker is a great way. There can be cross-generational learning, and especially with Rosenwald, cross-community learning. I think the seeing of Rosenwald, especially in Black and white audiences and Black and Jewish audiences, I think have enriched our admiration for each other and our understanding for each other. So nothing replaces that. And the film festivals have usually been the vehicle for that.
Many folks might not know that one of the largest Jewish film festivals in the world is based right here in the South. The tremendous growth of the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, founded in 2000, is not only a testament to its founder's foresight, but also an indicator of the explosive growth of Atlanta's Jewish community in the past few decades. I spoke to Brad Pilcher, the Associate Director of the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, about the festival's history and development, as well as his firm belief in the power of Jewish film.
Brad Pilcher. I'm the Associate Director at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. That basically means I'm the number 2 guy behind our executive director, Kenny Blank, and I work across all the different departments, programming, operations, finance, business development, helping us to put on the festival and all of our year-round programming every year. We were actually founded by the American Jewish Committee's Atlanta regional office in the year 2000. And they, I think, originally just envisioned it as a great opportunity, a great program to use film to serve their mission, which is building bridges between the Jewish community and other communities, both within the local, Atlanta region, but also internationally as well. It quickly took off. I think it surpassed even their wildest expectations. It grew very quickly. Kenny Blank came on board a few years into the festival's run as the executive director. He still is the executive director. And it just sort of spiraled up. I came on board back in 2007, started helping them with the program guide. And I remember my first experiences with the festival. It was, I think it maybe was 12 days long, a couple of venues. Not what it has become by any stretch. But I was struck by the growth of the organization in that first decade and a half. It grew so fast that the American Jewish Committee sort of looked at this thing and said, we can't continue to run this as a program. It's grown as big as we are. And so in 2014, we spun off from AJC to an independent nonprofit. So we have our own 501c3 status, focused on using film through a Jewish lens as a way to bridge communities together, to foster dialogue, to spark discussion. And it's that mission, I think, which distinguishes us and keeps us unique in the world of Jewish film festivals. A lot of Jewish film festivals exist. I think there's a couple of hundred around the world. The oldest, I think, is in San Francisco. And they're a robust community of film festivals. Many of them are run out of JCCs, they're run out of federations. In our case, our programmatic mission has always been guided by our original relationship with AJC. So we're not just looking for interesting Jewish films, we're looking for interesting Jewish films that really speak to the Jewish experience, particularly as it intersects with other non-Jewish communities, and really is about fostering discussion and dialogue. So that's been a very big part of our programming mission. I think one of the key ingredients to our success. Shortly after we spun off from AJC in 2014, the next year, our audience numbers surpassed 38,000. That made us the biggest Jewish film festival in the world. Although to be honest, that title does tend to ping pong back and forth depending on what part of the calendar year you're in. San Francisco has reclaimed that title. We have reclaimed that title from them. I think Miami Jewish Film Festival just claimed it for themselves this year after doing a sort of free film festival that was open to everybody around the world. Unique circumstances, to be sure. I think for us, we're very proud of the accomplishment. We're not super focused on the accomplishment. We're really much more focused on the audience experience and trying to put on a world-class festival for our audience members. Who happens to be the biggest is sort of a secondary point to that. But it has been exciting because we've been able to leverage our relationships in the film industry and leverage our programming mission to really bring in people from a pretty diverse background and start building out not only the annual festival, which is huge, 3 weeks long, but also year-round programming. We do a monthly film series. We've done a miniature version of the film festival on college campuses. We really sort of tried to push the boundaries in terms of what we're doing throughout the year. And then post-COVID pandemic, we started spinning off a whole slew of virtual programs. So we have a new podcast that we've been doing for about a year. We have AJFF Recommends, which is an online portal where you can search our entire film archive from going all the way back to 2000, see all the films that have ever been at the festival, see where they're available to stream online, and really sort of use it as a discovery engine. If you like this film, you like that film, what other films fall into the subject category. Really, really powerful platform, AJFF Playback. We're now doing a virtual select series this summer. It's just an exciting time for us because, I've seen the festival when it was just the annual festival. It was just this sort of, it was still pretty big, but it wasn't nearly what it became. And to see it being a true institution in the community in Atlanta, and a vehicle for film, all year round is really exciting. I think it's a combination of things. One, as I mentioned, I think the programmatic mission distinguished the festival. It really made it stand out in the marketplace. We weren't just looking for Jewish films. We're looking for films that would appeal across faith boundaries, across racial boundaries. And we have been rewarded for that programming with an audience which is incredibly diverse. Only about 3/4 of our audience is Jewish. About 1/4 of our audience is non-Jewish. We've got African American, Caucasian, we've got Muslim members of the audience. We've got all sorts of diverse communities within our festival audience and our festival family. That's a big part of it. I think another thing that distinguished us is that we were very, very committed very, very early on to not just finding interesting Jewish films, but really the best of the best, the cream of the crop, and world-class films that people would appreciate regardless of their Jewish content. In fact, in some cases, the Jewish content is relatively thin in a film, but that doesn't mean it's not a world-class film. It doesn't deserve a place in the festival. If the quality is there, I think that's enough. So for us, the quality of the films that we showcase, the professionalism that we brought to the whole experience, one of the things we're very, very prideful about is our sort of world-class audience experience at the festival. We don't use a lot of volunteers on site. We pay for an entire customer care team. It makes the festival more expensive to produce, but I think the audience appreciates that. The audience experience on site is, I think, world-class, second to none, even when you compare it to major film festivals like Toronto or Sundance or South by Southwest. I think we stack up there in terms of the experience that the audience has when they arrive in the theaters. Those are all key components, but I think the biggest component is the community itself. We worked very hard to cultivate not just a strong, passionate audience, but to really involve them in the festival, not just in the programming, but also the planning and the logistics. We put together a film evaluation committee that is members of the community, helping us to sort of vet these films. And that's something that other festivals don't do quite the same way. But for us, it was very important to build up that sense of buy-in, that sense of community investment. Our donor base is incredibly large. Our average donation is a pittance of our annual overall operating budget because we have so many individual donors who buy into the festival. And that's something we cultivated from the earliest days of the festival. So it's really putting all of those pieces together and building a really strong, passionate core base of the community that has come to expect from us a level of excellence that we hold ourselves to every year. When you put those two things together, it's a recipe for a very long, very, very strong friendship and very strong relationship that we have with our audience. Atlanta is, the fact that we're in Atlanta, I think, is important. Atlanta is obviously, it's the home of the civil rights movement. It's often called the city too busy to hate. And it has a long tradition of interfaith, interracial bridges where communities come together to make our community better, and in some cases to make the larger country better, the larger world better. And we really do tap into that. It's something that we feel very, very close to. And so for us, the mission of the festival is to recognize that film is one of the most populous mediums you can possibly have. Everybody goes to the movies. Everybody loves to watch movies. It's a very accessible medium, and it's a very safe space. If you are a deeply religious Muslim or Christian or Jew, you may not be comfortable going into a mosque or a church or a synagogue, but everybody goes to the movies. Everybody is comfortable going into that safe space of a movie theater and sitting down. And I think Roger Ebert was the one who said that movies are empathy engines. They're designed to put us in the shoes of the characters on the screen and really immerse us. We lose ourselves in the experience of watching movies for those couple of hours. And it allows us to see the world through the eyes of other people in the present, other people in the past, in some cases, other people in the future, but to really take you on a trip around the world into whole other communities and show you the differences, but also the similarities. And we really tap into that. For us, it's that power of film, which is, I think, really unique to film. It's the thing. Not everybody goes to the theater, unfortunately. Not everybody goes to the opera, unfortunately, or the orchestra. And those are not necessarily the most narrative mediums and art forms, but film is. It's totally accessible. Everybody's watched films. Everybody is comfortable with the format. And so we're able to reach a really wide audience and bring them together and show them really incredibly excellent independent international film that they wouldn't otherwise have a chance to see, but also give them an environment that is comfortable for them to talk amongst each other. Those Q&As are a crucial component. Sitting in line in the lobby or coming out of the theater at the end of the film as the credits are rolling and being surrounded by people who have sort of sat in that dark room with you, they've seen that film, having those discussions. It is one of the most magical things every year to stand in the lobby and just watch these conversations play out. The Q&As happen, and then the people who were on the panel up on stage will come out into the lobby, and the Q&A just keeps going. This crowd of people crowded around having these conversations. That's amazing. And I don't think there's any other, look, everybody listens to music too, but there's just something about sitting in a movie theater and being immersed in that story that just really does catch you on an emotional level, but also intellectually, it sort of sparks your curiosity. And who hasn't had that experience of going to the movies and then they walk out of the movie and on the car ride home or at the dinner table later, they're all either talking about what you saw, you're talking about all the things. So really for us, we lean into that. We're not an activist organization. We don't have policy positions. We're not going out there and arguing one way or the other. We have films that people criticize as pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian. We have films that dive into the civil rights issue. They delve into the Orthodox Jewish community and sexual assault and all sorts of touchy subjects and divisive topics. And we don't have a position really one way or the other on any of those things. What we really are looking for is smart, substantive filmmaking that is incredibly entertaining, but also incredibly informative and sparks dialogue. And when we do that, what we find is that people trust us. They're not coming to us because they agree with us. They're coming to us because they respect and they trust that we're going to find the best of the best when it comes to the independent international film community. And they're going to have an experience. They're going to walk out smarter than they were when they walked in. They're going to walk out more interested in the topic than when they walked in. And they know that. And over the years, we've built up that trust. And that's really what is our brand. That's really what allows us to have the staying power that we've had. Yeah, the pandemic absolutely forced a quick pivot. We were very lucky. We were able to get the 2020 festival in the books right before everything shut down. And I think if our timing had been any different, it would have been a disaster for us. But we were able to get the festival in place. That put us in a very good position programmatically, financially, to be able to weather the worst of the pandemic in the early days. But we really struggled because the thing about us, as I've said, is that we're about sparking dialogue and building a community of sorts around these films. And when you can't bring people together and get into a room and share the same air, literally, how do you do that? So we pivoted very hard. We had to cancel our entire slate of annual programming for the year. And instead of just saying, hey, look, we're gonna take some time off and really focus on figuring out 2021 and how are we going to do that, we leaned into trying to replace those pieces of the experience that we were losing, knowing we couldn't replicate it, knowing there was going to be some compromised quality to that. We were still going to try. And so the programs that we chose to launch virtually in a pandemic were very, very targeted. They were very, very purposeful in what we were trying to accomplish. AJFF Recommends was designed to give people access to all of our programming, but also to give them the ability to discover films in a way that they do at the festival. People come in, they some people like romantic comedies, some people like historical documentaries. Everybody has their kind of cup of tea, But there is this energy and this opportunity for people to sort of go outside their comfort zone in the annual festival, and just through word of mouth and other recommendations, sort of see a broader film landscape. We wanted to bring that to people and use our entire library, 20 years of films, hundreds of, if not thousands of films, to give people that same experience. And that was designed very purposefully to do that. Our podcast, and we did a series of webinars as well, and AJFF in Conversation, those were all things that were designed to try to replicate that communal dialogue, that opportunity to talk about the films we were watching, and to hear from experts and to hear from filmmakers, but also to hear from each other. And we've designed those programs very purposefully to do that. AJFF Playback was an opportunity to sort of take everybody being pent up and wanting to, to consume, something to take their minds off of things, but to do so in a very purposeful way, to have a sort of bracket, March Madness style approach, give people some skin in the game. People could talk to each other about what films they were watching, and who they were voting for, and who was winning and who was losing, and to bring those communities together. These were all very purposeful attempts on our part to recreate a little bit of what was being lost. And people responded to it very, 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 very passionately. One of the things that I think we're taking away from this year, in this pandemic, especially having done a mostly virtual festival in 2021 with some drive-ins mixed in, was that, we gained as much as we lost. One of the things that we've always known is true is that to get certain people to come out to the movie theaters was a challenge. If you were physically disabled, if you were elderly, if you were living in a seniors living home, if you were students and you were in class, these are groups that it wasn't easy for them to get into the theaters in some cases. And we found that by using virtual programming and virtual streaming of films and Q&As and live discussions online, we were able to reach these people in a way that was easier for them, made it more accessible for them. And that's something we want to continue to incorporate into our programming. And so I think going forward, will never look like we looked before the pandemic. It'll be a hybrid model. We definitely want to get back to in-person programming when we can do so safely. We're very hopeful that by the time we get to February of next year and the 2022 festival, that by then people will be, genuinely comfortable coming into theaters. But the reality is we're never going to let go of those virtual components. A lot of that programming is going to continue on because, again, it increased the accessibility of the experience. And I think it broadened the audience. And for us, being flexible was an important part of this year, but it reminded us that our mission is about the films, the storytelling that goes on in those films, and the discussions that those stories evoke. And all of that can happen inside of a commercial movie theater. It doesn't have to happen inside of a commercial movie theater. And especially as people's viewing habits evolve and change, even pre-pandemic, we're going to have to continue to be creative and pivot and recognize that our first and foremost job is to program world-class films and to meet the audience where they are so that we can have a really interesting dialogue. And, as much as we can do that inside of a physical building, we're going to do that. But knowing the accessibility gains that we got, the convenience gains that we got in terms of doing things virtually, we'll hold on to that too. Especially, I think, for the Jewish community. I mean, we're the people of the book, the people of the storytelling. I think, as a community, our traditions are steeped in story. And so any film festival or book festival or any festival that's really built around the idea of narrative arts and narrative storytelling is powerful for us as a community. And so that's one of the reasons why I think the Jewish niche in terms of film festivals has been so huge and so successful around the world. It's not, you don't necessarily see the same robust representation in terms of other niche communities and film festivals. But for the Jewish community, it's huge. The film festival model is one that I think is increasingly important when you look at the landscape in the industry of film. There was a time not that long ago when I was growing up that everybody went to the movies every weekend. That was, if you were going on a date, it was a movie. It was really, really, really accessible. And you saw a much broader range of the types of films you would see in commercial movie theaters. You saw a lot of sort of mid-tier films, romantic films, dramas that there were not big blockbusters. There were no superheroes involved, and they were successful. And they got wide audiences. They didn't necessarily blow the doors off in a way that a blockbuster like Jaws or Star Wars would, but they were still successful. Increasingly, when you look at the film industry, those are films that do not exist inside of commercial movie theaters anymore. They exist on Netflix. They exist in streamers. And that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. The world changes and the industry changes, and I'm less worried about that. But unquestionably, to me and to people who are cinephiles, the experience of going into a theater and the lights come down and your cell phone is not on and you're not distracted and you're able to just give yourself totally over to the film and also share that experience with other people in the theater. I have had so many incredible memories of sitting in a movie and laughing out loud and hearing all the other people in the room laughing out loud or cheering or crying or whatever in these films that you just won't get when you're sitting on your couch at home by yourself, maybe just with your immediate family, having that experience. It's a very different experience. It's much more powerful. It's much more rewarding. And then when you bring the participation of filmmakers, of actors, of screenwriters, of film editors, of experts and journalists and writers coming together and having a collective discussion around the films that you're seeing, it's just a heightened level of artistic consumption. And it's increasingly hard to find in your everyday film experience. There are fewer and fewer theaters. There are fewer theaters that are showing those kinds of films, foreign films, subtitled films, independent films. Those are, I live in Atlanta. We've got 2 or 3 what I would call art house theaters. We're doing really well in terms of we're lucky we have that. Most cities don't have that. There are plenty of cities in this country that don't even have theaters at all anymore. Smaller towns. That's a loss. And so as lucky as I am and we are to be in a city that has those, I know how scarce it is. And I know that it's something that is increasingly hard to sustain. So a film festival is an opportunity to fill that void, to come together and to put something on the calendar that's special, and that people can kind of come and have a different experience from what they're traditionally getting at the commercial movie theaters and the big multiplexes, to see independent films, to see smaller films, to see foreign language films. These are just, you can get them at home, you can get them on Netflix, but you're not going to have the same experience with them as you would in a darkened room. And I just genuinely believe that if you're talking about the real power of film, nothing is better than a dark room with a bunch of strangers and a giant screen. It is the way film is really meant to be seen. It's the way filmmakers envision their films being seen. And the power of it just cannot be matched.
So, what have our conversations taught us about the future of Jewish film? Film is a mode of cultural expression, but it's also a site of contestation and assimilation. The history of Jews in the American film industry lays bare the complexity of these dynamics. Jews have contributed substantially to the shaping of American cinema, but they've never been fully in control due to both explicit anti-Semitism and more insidious alienation from mainstream American culture. Jews in the film industry have historically sought to assimilate, but only selectively, as Jewish film festivals make evident. The complex relationship between assimilating, contributing to dominant American culture, and asserting a minority culture offers fruitful terrain for research and exploration. So, what does the future of Jewish film look like? What does the future of the entire industry look like, given the changes brought about by the pandemic? What is the function of the film festival, and will it be diminished by shifts toward more online content, or will it be bolstered by reaching broader audiences and shrinking its overhead costs? I hope that this episode inspires you to seek out Jewish films and to support Jewish cultural institutions in your home community. Keep the conversation going, and hopefully we'll see you in person at a Southern Jewish Film Festival soon. Don't click away just yet. I have a mission for you. The next episode of the ISJL Virtual Vacation will premiere on Facebook and YouTube at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, June 29th, and we need your help to make it happen. We'll be talking all about Southern Jewish restaurants, how they developed, how they've changed over time, their iconic menu items, and of course, how they've weathered the pandemic. I want to read your recommendations and share images and videos that you've captured at restaurants in the South run by or founded by Jews. Maybe you have a memory of an unforgettable meal you'd like to share, or maybe you remember the place your family always went for dinner during your childhood. Maybe you're a restaurant owner with a story to tell about how your business has changed over time. Please visit the ISJL Virtual Vacation website to learn more about how to submit your stories, images, and videos. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with us anytime at heritage@isjl.org. Thank you again for your support of the ISJL Virtual Vacation. We'll see you next time.